Alright. Now we're cooking.
Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's Great South Side. Get ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style.
I hope you are all ready for some super jive in the Father Hines style.
What could this be? Ah, it's a Limehouse Blues.
Evening, Mona. Hey, Chris. Evening, Octavio. There we go. Hey, Karen, Martin, and Cindy. Hey, Georgia. Hey, Larry. All you assorted Mysterians. Hey, Susan. Hey, Luann. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Joyce. Hey, Bridget and Mary Jo. Let's all go for a boat ride. Perfect weather for that, huh? Huh? Sure it is. Of course it is. Hey, Dad. Evening, Kathy. Hey, Marcia. Hey, Jean. Evening, Evelyn. Hey, Ellen and Mary. Hey, everybody. Okay. Hey, Gene. Hey, Casey. Hey, Carrie. Hey, Terry. Evening, Susan and Bob. Hey, Marie. Ah, glad to hear that, Kathy. Archive trip, whammy. I really hit the whammy this time. Still really trying to find one of the Hawkwives. I just can't figure out whatever became of her. I mean, nothing in it indicates her maiden name or whether she had kids. There's like nothing about her background. Which is the same, given she's great. She was always good for a good line. Well, then she just disappears. I don't need a chicken hat, but we can always pop on a chicken hat. Hey, then Heather. I don't know where Miles is now. Miles was driving me nuts much of the day. Javier, that's awesome. And Marie. Hey, Beverly. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Paula. No, he was not helping. He was clawing right through my sweatpants. Do they have cows like that, chicken? I believe they do. They probably have larger ones, too. They're called warmies. They're all the rage down at the coffee shop. You can put them in the microwave and there's like lavender beans inside. They warm up. And there's in fact a large assortment of available animals in different sizes. This is Camilla, of course. Hey, Joanne. Hey, Tracy Marita. Evening, everybody. There is a pink animal of some sort. I feel like it's more of a hippo than a cow. But I'm sure you can get them other places than just one coffee shop in Chicago. I got a great picture of Lily right next to this one. You can't tell where Lily starts and Camilla begins. Hey, Amy.
Give our faithful seat a slap and carry on and jive. Hi-ho, Silver!
Hey, Diane, hey, Lauren. Evening, everybody. Welcome along. I try not to do the boat tour too often virtually, because I got to sell tickets for it in person now and then, you know. Hey, Kathleen, euphoniums. Hey to all the euphoniums, the whole low brass. As an old low brassman myself. Heather, well done. Evening, Karen. Hey, Diane. Hey, Megan. I'm sure that's... I don't know. Some work sucks. I have to get my allergy shot on Thursdays, and I don't know, man. Since I got to the last vial, it just hurts like hell. Plus, I'm still hurting from that root canal. They're quick on the Google and broke no disputes. Evening, everybody. Welcome along. Tomorrow will be Find a Grave Friday. We'll be back out on the road. Elaine, well, no, don't drown. The paperwork. Megan's leaving on Tuesday. Awesome. I'm leaving on Wednesday for New York. I'm just having some Buffalo Trace tonight. Might switch to another bourbon later. This is the time of the year when I'm working on books with a pipe and some bourbon. It's very nice. Pipe of bourbon and some jazz LPs. Nice and cold outside. How do you beat that? Hey, June. February 2nd, if you're going to... What con is that? I'm playing at some con. I gotta look up what con that is. Hey, Brenda. Hey, Sarah. Let me see. What con is that? 7 p.m. I'll be in, like, the big ballroom. Capricorn. I'll play some acoustic stuff. I'll sing along with some backing tracks. It'll be a good concert. Lauren, I do have a smoking jacket, but it's not as comfortable as just being in sweaters, honestly. Karen, yeah, I can beat 8 to the bar. Beat me, daddy, 8 to the bar. How has that song not come back up? Hey, Emily. Evening, Grandma Bell. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Emily. Evening, Susan and Deirdre. Welcome along, everybody. We're just giving we're giving Earl Father Hines another minute or so for everybody to get online. And I'll be right back at it. Just kind of working 24 hours a day, pretty much, on the Johann Hawk book right now. The archives run today was a total bust.
Father Hines gives us a bit of jive under the general heading of So Help Me.
Hey, Jen and Nancy. Jancy. Hey, Janice. Welcome along. Bob, there is in fact a purple hippo. I don't know if they have the full selection down at the understudy. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Maureen. Hey, Megan, I'll be there too. I don't know how much outdoor stuff this group will be doing. It's a bunch of kids from Texas. It'll be like in the 40s while we're there. So to me, I'll be all like putting on my shorts. Hey, Bella. I've only been to Newport once for the folk festival. Back in '02. No, '03. No. '02. 2. Hey, Kelly. We're gonna let Earl Father Hines finish off this tune, and then we will start up properly. Eggnog and Soko. Okay. Rather than eggnog, I just got some Buffalo Trace bourbon cream this year. It was pretty tasty. Whoa, there goes Camilla. If you wondered how long I could balance a bean stuffed chicken on my shoulder, that long. Evening, Joanne. Gonna give it just a minute for this song to wrap up. Now, Camilla, Bella, just like Gonzo's chicken. Most of you know I got this awesome Gonzo animation cell and rigged it up properly. Yeah. Evening, everybody. That sounds like Earl's wrapping up.
Well, we're about halfway through.
All right, we're about halfway through this program of Super Jive on Chicago's Great South Side. Let's move up into the Loop and River North vicinity and get started. Welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I have been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out right now, working on another all about Johann Hawk, one of our old-timey serial killers. That'll go along with books like Mysterious Chicago, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Ghosts of Chicago, now available in a new 10th anniversary edition over on Amazon. Also, a young adult novel called Just Kill Me, which is all about a Chicago ghost tour guide who makes places more haunted by killing people at them. It's, who am I kidding? It is completely autobiographical. Tour guide immunity, that's what I'll claim. Okay, but all right, so welcome along, everybody. Glad to have you all here. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. One of the things that I am able to do is architectural boat tours. Now, they're the most popular kind of tour in Chicago. Most of the places that I worked for over time did not pay particularly well, but I did become a better tour guide by working in those gigs. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to do a virtual version. It is way too cold to want to be out on a boat in Chicago right now, but we can do it virtually, and you don't even have to pay to park, which usually costs much more than anybody donates on these. But welcome along, everybody. So here we are at Ogden Slip. I've got myself way too large here. Just going along the edge of the Navy here, heading into DuSable Harbor, which was named after Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, who was generally acknowledged as the first non-native settler of Chicago. Came here in the 1770s. Very little is known about this guy. There's maybe 3 paragraphs worth of good primary source data. He is thought to have been a fur trader from Haiti, though there are those who say that he was escaping from down south someplace, or even that he was a pirate on the run from a Caribbean. Nobody really knows, nor do we really have any idea whether he actually looked like the drawing below. But that is how we picture him. That is his appearance observed. Lived here for a while, got annoyed that the Potawatomi would not make him chief, and hence split the scene, leaving behind a long trail of mysteries. But we love those around here. There's always another mystery to solve here in Chicago. Now, coming up along here, we're heading into the Ogden Slip area, named after Mayor Ogden, our very first mayor, William, whose grave we can track down over in New York sometime. Coming up ahead of us here, well, we're coming into this area. This is all a landfill. Pretty much all of the land that you can see here on the other side of this bridge, all the way to the next couple of bridges, is landfill. Lake Michigan used to go all the way out to Michigan Avenue. That's why they called it Michigan Avenue. Now, there's a couple of different reasons that this changed. One is the stuff that would be behind us right now, a lot of that is landfill from after the Great Chicago Fire. Don't know if you guys heard about this, but we had a pretty big fire here in Chicago. And after we cleaned up the rubble, we swept all of the rubble into the lake and created land. But this part of the land, coming up on the other side that we're facing now, this land was more or less created by Captain George Wellington Streeter. His story was that in 1888 he crashed his houseboat onto the shore during a storm, and then having been dry docked there, he started charging people money to dump their garbage around his ship. The city was already filling in the land, but they decided to just let him go along with it. But then he forged a bunch of deeds, got himself some maps, and claimed that he was not only the owner of this land, but also that it was his own independent country, of which he was the emperor, being a bit of an eccentric and all this. So it took the cops 30 years to get rid of this guy, and it wasn't just legal battles, there were gunfights. He had a whole army of hobos that he had allowed to emigrate to his new country. Finally, in 1919, after nearly 30 years, he did lose the Battle of Garbage Hill. Spent the last couple of years of his life selling coffee at what is now Navy Pier. But just on the other side of these buildings we are facing, we now have a statue of Captain George Wellington Streeter. That's what we do with criminals and pirates here in Chicago. We make statues of them, or let them put their name in buildings on very large letters. So anyway, just to put a few things in context, at the time Captain Streeter crashed on board the shore, we had just gotten up to about 1 million people in Chicago. When Chicago was first formed in the 1830s, or first officially became a town, we had a few thousand people. We went from effectively rounding down to 0 up to 1 million in about a generation and a half. No city had ever grown at that kind of a rate. So you'd think, with all of that rapid growth, we would be an excellent place to become the birthplace of the skyscraper, which is what we are, but it's not that logical if you look at the soil around here. It's a very wet, marshy soil, and old skyscrapers used to be an awful lot heavier than the current ones. Sometimes downtown you can still see old buildings where they kind of taper out at the bottom. So we solved this problem, though. An architect named William LeBaron Jenney developed what we call steel frame construction. Built the home insurance building. Basically makes a skeleton for the building out of steel. All of the glass, all of the masonry, all of the stone, that just gets draped over the front of that building like a curtain. And there you have it. Allowed for much lighter buildings, allowed him to make the home insurance building, what was generally regarded as the first modern skyscraper back in the 1870s. It stood until the 1930s when it was torn down, depending on who you believe. There was a Chicago Tribune article in the early 20th century claiming that the home insurance building, among others, had been destroyed by dinosaurs. This is a very early example of a short story in which dinosaurs wreck everything. Now, of course, we cover up that story now. I don't know how we managed that. But as we get over here, we can do a pretty good Architecture 101. In front of us, we see several examples of modernism, the style that was common in the mid-20th century. Plain black boxes. Everything very dull, frankly. That replaced the style known as Art Deco, coming up a little ways behind my head, right down below here. Here is a better look at 333 North Michigan. This is a style we call Art Deco from the just before the modernist era, the 1920s, the 1930s, the architecture of the Jazz Age. Streamlined verticality, clean lines, simple geometric art. Right over behind here, we've got the Equity Building by Nathalie Delbois, which is what they call the International School of Architecture. It's like modernism, but without the elegance. There are people who absolutely love the International School of Architecture. I don't know why. But as we come up over here, we come to the Wrigley Building, the first skyscraper that anchors what is now called the Magnificent Mile. What is now North Michigan Avenue was still called Pine Street as of the turn of the 20th century. But everybody knew by 1920 that now that Captain Streeter was gone, now that they had built the Michigan Avenue Bridge, this was going to become the Magnificent Mile, one of the premier shopping destinations anywhere. And, there was some worry that it might just turn out to be like the gaudy Times Square of the Midwest. So everybody, especially after they announced that William Wrigley Jr. had commissioned Graham Anderson, Probst, and White to make a new skyscraper for him here, they thought, oh great, we know this guy for his billboards for Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. He's probably going to have a giant billboard there. But he announced that, no, I just want the most beautiful and elegant office building in the world. No advertisements, just the Wrigley Building in a plain little plaque on the first floor. And we loved him for it. Al Chase, the Chicago Tribune's architectural critic, published a huge editorial praising William Wrigley Jr. to the sky for not putting his name on the building in giant letters like some damn maniac. So we loved him for it. They kept building things like the London Guarantee Building in a style that was made to match the Wrigley Building, even after Art Deco really took over as the style of the day. That's something that architects do have to think about, like how is my building going to fit in with the others? Like when Adrian Smith was designing 420 Wabash here, 91 felony counts high. He had to figure, how am I going to make this fit in, even though it's the same size, so it's like 3 times taller than everything else. He did this with a lot of little things called contextualism. It's a way you can collude with the built environment. For instance, the setback on the right there matches the setback over at the Wrigley Building. Next setback on the left matches the setback on the corncob-looking buildings coming up later. And the setback on the right, higher up, matches the height of this one right over here behind me as we turn. The old IBM building, the plain black one here. This is by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, really the guy we most associate with the architecture of modernism. He wanted his buildings to be like a new kind of cathedral for a new kind of religion, that religion being commerce. This is now the AMA building, American Medical Association, one of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's last buildings. Now, other architects were still putting ornamentation on buildings sometimes. They were still making statues on buildings sometimes. They had more imagination than he did. But he would just stand in front of his students and hold up a brick and say, "Behold the brick, the simple beauty of the raw materials," in a much thicker German accent than I can possibly fake without looking like Johann Hawk or something. Now, one of his students, Bertrand Goldberg, designed these 2 corncob-looking buildings known as Marina City. He believed in a lot of the tenets of modernism, but didn't like all of the rectangles. He is often quoted as saying there are no right angles in nature, so there shouldn't be any in architecture. Though he designed plenty of buildings that had right angles all over them. He was as much an architect as he was a city planner. He wanted to draw people back downtown in the 1960s. At the time, a lot of people were leaving the city to go to places where they could actually park their cars. So he designed these 2 things that were going to be apartments that would draw people back downtown. It would be parking down below. But not only would it be apartments, there would also be office space. There would be retail. There would be a bowling alley. For those were bowling days, and most men bowled hard. You never had to leave the building if you lived in there. The people thought it was the most modern thing in the world. I think it still holds up visually as a very modern couple of buildings. I think they might have fixed it now, but for years I said it was modern when it came out, but it wasn't really built for the future. These concrete buildings are where a cell phone signal goes to die. It is sometimes rumored that he designed it so people could park their flying cars in there too. You just fly your car right into the slot. Over on the left, another modernist building. This is what we call brutalism. Usually when we think of these concrete buildings, they're not quite as pretty. This is 55 Wacker, the old Blue Cross building, now known as the pound sign building or the hashtag building, depending on how old you are. That one was designed by Otto Stark, which is possibly the greatest name ever for a brutalist architect. He also happens to be my next door neighbor. So I probably shouldn't rip on it too hard. We don't see Otto out very often. It's like when we see Otto, the rest of his name is like Otto sighting. It's almost like seeing Bigfoot or something. Now, over on the right-hand side, the Reed Murdoch building from 1913. The Reed Murdoch building is one of the older buildings that we'll see on an architectural boat tour on the river these days. This is as close as we get to the Prairie School of Architecture, which tended to emphasize the horizontal over the vertical. And you can see right in the middle there, between the posts, you see these little ornamentations that are supposed to look like wheat shafts. That represented the fact that this was a grocery warehouse. A lot of times, Prairie School architects especially liked the outside to reflect what went on the inside. The clock tower used to be right smack in the middle. They had to lop off part of the building when they added the LaSalle Street Bridge. Used to be that when you crossed the river at LaSalle, you didn't go over it, you went under it into these tunnels. The tunnels are still there. They're full of damp sand. They have been since the 1950s, but they are still down there. Do we know he's still there? Yeah, we still bump into Otto. We still see Otto occasionally. I don't know how old he is exactly. But he's still out there. He's still sighted occasionally. On the right over here, I'll turn myself off for a second so you can see the Chase Sanborn Coffee Warehouse, now called the Chicago School, by Lars Hallberg. Probably the best example of what was called the Chicago School of Architecture, which kind of bridged the gap between Beaux-Arts, the style of the 19th century, and Art Deco. Now we get over here to the Merchandise Mart, 1930 Graham Anderson Probes in White, built to be the wholesale showroom for Marshall Field. Marshall Field really didn't make money at their flagship store on State Street. That whole thing was one big advertisement for their wholesale deals. This is where they kept all the wholesale stuff, at least briefly. In the 1930s, they lost all of their money and had to sell to Joseph Kennedy. So this is the Pez Dispenser Hall of Fame. These things that look like giant Pez dispensers are busts of the giants of merchandising. Guys like Marshall Field, of course. I always wish Samuel Kresge was up there, and I always wish you could put a coin in the slot and make him talk and get Samuel Kresge of Kmart fame to be like, "Attention Kmart shoppers. Blue light special on underpants in aisle 14. Kind of dating myself with that joke, I suppose. All right, we come up now to Wolf Point. This is called Wolf Point East right here. They've already built Wolf Point South now. That's Wolf Point West on the side. These are some residential buildings that are incredibly expensive to rent. I love that they're calling them the Wolf Point buildings, though. Wolf Point is what the early pioneers and settlers called this little stretch of the river where the two branches of the river come together. Exactly why they call it that is kind of lost to history now. There's a couple of different theories going around, but this would have been downtown to some of the first people who set up permanent settlements here in Chicago. Among them was the place called the Sauganash Hotel that we just talked about last week on the talk about pop music in Chicago. It's about the earliest example we have of Chicago music was Mark Bobine playing his fiddle and saying, I keep the tavern like hell and I play the fiddle like the devil. So you could rent a bed there, but you didn't get a bed, you slept on the floor. And if you fell asleep under your blanket, they would take the blanket off and rent it to somebody else. You being too old to notice, you'd be all right. Too sleep to notice. I'm looking at the auto comments over there. It wasn't really just to be a dick, I don't think. It was also because doing laundry would have been really tricky out on the frontier. Little things like that we don't always think about anymore. Like take, for instance, this pink building coming up in front of us, redeveloped in the 1970s by Harry Weiss. Here he is staring at it. This is the old North American cold storage warehouse, and when that was built in the early 20th century, they didn't have modern advanced refrigeration techniques. To keep things cool in there, they did not have any windows. They've had to add those later. The walls were several feet thick. The walls were stuffed with frozen horsehair, ammonia, brine, frozen cork, all kinds of things to keep stuff frozen. Now, when he turned it into condos and lofts in the 1970s. First, he had to thaw the building out for a while. Then he had to haul away like 500 train car loads of frozen horsehair. Then he had to add all the windows. And you can kind of see there's these little things that look like stars all over the building. They're actually holding it together. It would have been a lot easier, honestly, to tear the thing down and put up a new one. But the greenest building is a building that already exists. And Harry Weiss was a very preservation-minded architect. He often was known to say that, well, he said so many things, but he said, it was said around town that you never wanted to fall asleep next to Harry Weiss. If you stood next to him for more than 5 minutes, he might declare you a landmark. All right, so we all bow our heads here under the Kinsey Street Bridge, also known as the Dave Matthews Band Poop Bridge. With the Dave Matthews Band's tour bus let a whole bunch of sewage out on a bus just like this one. Aren't you glad you're on a virtual tour and Dave Matthews is not, to my knowledge, on tour right now? We do remember him. I'd say we pour one out, but this is Buffalo Trace. I ain't pouring that out. But also on certain boats, we nearly crack our heads open on that one. And I have often said, if I ever die on the job and end up as a feature on the Ghost Tours, it will definitely be at the Dave Matthews Band Poop Bridge. Definitely. I will be the headless tour guide of the Dave Matthews Poop Bridge. Crash into me. We'll spin around over here. As we've really already been here, we're going to zip ahead just a little. Now, Harry Weiss was not just a preservation guy, he was also a very innovative, eccentric architect in his own right. Designed these 4 cool townhouses known as the River Cottages. This would have been back in the early 90s. 3 out of 4, last I checked, were still owned by the people who bought them when they first came up on the market. They currently go for a couple of million. Only one of them is sold recently, but because of that, we got to see the real estate listings, which are awesome. Coming up here, the River Bend building. Mansionettes down below, condos up top. The middle section is the parking garage. Trick here is the parking garage is so narrow you can't really turn a car around in it. There's an elevator that takes cars up to the different levels. Car elevators is something we've been experimenting with in Chicago since at least the 1920s. You know, we have to be very creative with our space here. In about a 1 square mile radius of where we are right now, there are about as many people as there are in the entire state of Wyoming. Cramming that many people together, where do you keep them all? Where do you park their cars? Where do you put their stuff? We have to be kind of creative to make this work, and especially to make it work with style. Like, look at these things here that look like portholes. Those tie this area visually into the River Cottages and some other buildings with porthole accessories around here. But they're also doing a practical thing. They're pumping out diesel exhaust fumes from the railroad tracks that are hidden behind that wall. A lot of these buildings are built on what's called air rights. Back in the 20s, the railroads figured they could make extra money by adding railroad tracks underneath the building, or by selling the air up above so people could add the railroad tracks beneath. Took a while to get it done, but it also took a lot of engineering because you had to have a building that would stand up on its own but still have room for a train to go underneath it. Hey, Blacksmith Dan over in the chat for the first time. Welcome along. Now, speaking of remarkable feats of engineering, this is 155 North Riverside here that looks like it has a wedge chopped out of it by Getch Partners. This little patch of land where it was built was sitting empty for a really long time because nobody could really figure out a way to cost-effectively build anything there. Getch Partners came up with what is called a core-supported structure. The idea is you just have a core for the building, the stone portion that you see, that rose up until it was out of everything's way, then had the building flare outward and rise up about 700 feet in the sky. Now, core-supported structures like this are not unheard of. Harry Weiss built one in the 70s, but they don't usually go 700 feet tall. Now, you might have heard that really tall buildings are occasionally known to sway in the wind a little bit. Officially, they don't sway. What they do is give, but if you're a layman, that means exactly the same thing. So at the top of this one is what is called a liquid-tuned mass damper, also known as a slosh damper, but liquid-tuned mass damper sounds a lot cooler. It's really just a giant tank of water that's built so that when the wind blows one way, the water will flow the other to keep everything steady. Tremendous engineering. And underneath Randolph Street we go. This is one of the 2 loudest bridges that we go under on a boat tour. Washington is the loudest. I don't know why, but it is. Here we are at the Boeing building. This is the Boeing building. This smaller portion is being held up by the larger portion due to some steel trusses up on the top. We, of course, do... I'm kind of worried now that the whole thing's going to fall apart. Just the other day, Ronnie was supposed to be on a Boeing airplane, but they canceled that flight. Boeing has now left Chicago. Kind of feel like we got the good end of that deal. I'm sure there's a reason why we didn't. All right, we're going to under Washington Boulevard Bridge now. This is not actually named for Washington. It is named for Frederick Boom Boom Washington of Brooklyn. And if you don't believe that, then up your nose with a rubber hose. This is by Holabird and Rouge, the Art Deco Chicago Daily News Building. The first newspaper to move on the other side of the river. They used to all be on Madison Street. So this is also one of the first skyscrapers to have a public plaza out in front, which was a bold move at the time. This was a much rougher area. Terrific novel, Knock on Any Door by Willard Motley. Origin of the phrase, live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse. I feel like every other page of that book, somebody is getting mugged in the plaza outside of the Daily News building. Maybe not that many. But the Daily News has finally been digitized in the last few years. You don't have to go to the library to go through the microfilm room, though I still have to go there for the Record, the Journal, the Herald Examiner, the Record Herald, the Gem of the Prairie, and on and on and on. Now, I think a lot of you guys saw this part on the mini tour the other day, so we're going to zip ahead a little ways. I think the mini tour got us to right about River City. Cigarettes illegal in this state. River City, you might recognize a little bit of Bertrand Goldberg style here. Similar to River City. Similar to Marina City. Now this, initially he wanted this to be 75 feet tall, and you see it kind of goes in an S shape here. He wanted it to keep on going, snaking all the way back to that last bridge. Never quite worked out like that. It would have been a building that housed about 250,000 people. Now, if you look just down the road there for a second, you can see a clock tower. That is the one building on the riverboat tour that I can actually trace Al Capone to. He's said to have been in all of these buildings. But that was the old Dearborn Street train station where he switched trains on the way to jail. Yes, there is in fact trouble here in River City. That's trouble with a capital T that rhymes with C, and that stands for cell phone coverage. We'll loop around here. That's the Roosevelt Collection. Another city within a city, really. It's mall shops, movie theaters, and apartments. Let's move it on along. We'll pause here briefly to check out my bridge. Sears Tower stands 1,451 feet tall. The official name is now the Willis Tower, but locals still refer to it as the Sears on a penalty of torture. On a clear day from the observation deck, you can see 4 states. Today's selections are Wisconsin, Indiana, Nebraska, and New Jersey. Another Harry Weiss building right there in front of us. That white one that looks like it's got a wedge chopped out of it up at the top. Triangle shapes. You see a lot of triangle shapes in Harry Weiss buildings. I think people kind of over-exaggerate the prevalence of triangles in the Harry Weiss au revoir. But there are a lot of triangles such as that one. 1,451 feet tall, the Sears Tower is no longer the tallest building in the world, but it held onto that record for really a very long time. And once we get past this building, we'll get a bit of a better view of the Sears. There we go, all the way up. And that 1,451 does not count the antennas. It's a strange quirk in architecture rules that antennas don't count, but spires do. Now, even if you didn't count the spire, it wouldn't be the tallest anymore. It was still taller than the World Trade Center, counting spires versus antennas, really. But, or if you don't count the spire on that one. But now there's a building in the Central Park Tower in New York has finally topped it. Also, not to mention, besides that, we've got the Burj Khalifa, which is 2,700 feet tall. That's like the Sears plus the antenna plus another 1,000 feet. The Jeddah Tower in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia is under construction, will be about 3,000 feet tall if it's ever actually completed. But all of those were designed by Adrian Smith, Chicago architect, whose office is right down the block. And this is Adams Street, which is named after me. Just drink to me here. Incidentally, there's where you donate right down below. My timing is a little off tonight, isn't it? That's okay. It keeps things a little bit fresh. Right here, the old Hartford Insurance Building with the outer skeleton protecting the interior glass, the same way the strength of his Hartford Insurance policy protects your fragile life. See how they do on dental insurance sometime. I couldn't find a lot of good data about that one, so I just have to come up with that, how the outside reflects the inside. All right, you know what we're going to do here is we are going to move ahead a little ways. We're going to skip some of these office buildings. Make our way back, first of all, to 333 West Wacker. This one tends to win a lot of popularity contests. We're going to move ahead and get some of these classic skyscrapers coming up. This one by Cohn Peterson and Fox, the rock stars of postmodernism. Really, after we got tired of plain black boxes, we moved on to postmodernism, which was really just a matter of saying less is not more, less is a bore. This one, it's still a very simple building, really, but it reflects a lot of things. The octagon-shaped support towers match the octagons at the merchandise mart on the other side. Also, of the two colors of the glass, at least one usually reflects the color of the river. The whole thing reflects the skyline just beautifully. Of course, it is possibly best known now for being the building where Ferris Bueller's dad works, and somehow looks out onto Dearborn Street. No one knows how. Hollywood magic. Also, speaking of contextualism, this building beyond it, another Cohn Peterson and Fox joint, is supposed to echo Navy Pier, which you can't actually see from here very well. But that's the idea. That's their story, and they're sticking to it. Everybody duck. Yeah, Beth, I did the You Are Here building on the morning mini tour the other day, so I didn't want to overdo it too much. Right here, this building with the columns is the Halliburton Roots old Chicago Daily Times building, which became the Chicago Sun-Times. The Daily Times is a real trip of a paper. They loved their mobster stories down at the Chicago Daily Times. Up along there is Upper Wacker Drive. Down below is Lower Wacker Drive. Now, having a bi-level road going around the business district was part of Daniel Burnham's great plan for Chicago. Daniel Burnham is really better remembered as a city planner for a long time, but now we're starting to talk about him more as an architect again because he did so much work on the World's Fair of 1893, which has become very popular to talk about these days. Now, Burnham for that World's Fair brought back Greek revivalism, having a lot of columns and things in a very big way. You see echoes of it really all over the city, even here in the modern Builders building from like 30 years later. You see up around the top there, they've got that colonnade of columns where the colonnaded ruins domino. You also see it at things like the Marshall Fields downtown, which is now the Macy's, and which incidentally is one of fairly few places where I can actually trace Al Capone downtown. Came out during his trial that he used to buy all of his underpants there. Well, they weren't just underpants, they were what they called union suits, combination shirt and shorts, made out of ladies' glove silk, which the jury thought was absolutely hilarious. Transphobic twerps that they were back in the 1920s, 1930s. Everybody duck again right here. Here we got the LaSalle Wacker building from 1930. I can't quite trace Capone himself to this. I can trace his gang there. Frank the Enforcer Nitti was operating the gang out of one of the lower floors of here after Capone went to jail. He was not as good a gangster as Capone was. Didn't have nearly the PR skills. Wasn't as good at staying away from the cops either. Cops busted into this place one day. Shot Frank the Enforcer Nitti up pretty good. Didn't kill him, but it's not like he lived to a ripe old age. Gangster was not a job where you got to have a long life expectancy. You just got to wear really nice underpants. Hey, Ronnie. What are you doing?
Getting ready to download the new Sims packs.
Outside?
No, I was locking the door.
Oh, okay. 77 Wacker, the United building right over here in front of us. 1990 to Stephen and Partners, Ricardo Bofill, the architect. Old-style, postmodern take on rows of columns up at the top, even a Greek-style pediment roof. 4 of the columns extend all the way down, tying the whole building together. I don't think that building is ever going to go out of style. There are those who say the building next door might have, but I don't want to say it too loud. Bella, that is correct. Ronnie plays The Sims a lot. Off in the distance, you can see the Carbide and Carbon building. The one with the green with the gold on top. I thought for years it was an urban legend that was based on a champagne bottle, but there actually is a bit of the diary of Daniel Burnham Jr., who helped design it, saying that the builders wanted it to look like the green color of an old champagne bottle. So I love it when those things actually work out. Normally I am known for debunking these things, but now and then. Now coming up just beyond that, once we get underneath the bridge here, You're drinking when you say duck. Duck, 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 duck. Chicken buck, 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 duck, 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 duck. The Jewelers Building by Fred Dinkelberg. Used to work for Burnham, never got any credit for the work he did with Burnham, like the Flatiron Building in New York. This one was designed with one of our first real car automobiles. There's an outstanding legend that Al Capone operated a place there inside the Stratosphere Club. The Stratosphere Club was real. It was up in the dome of the Jewelers Building, or as it was called by then, the Pure Oil Building. But Capone absolutely never set foot in it. It wasn't until years after Capone went to jail. There's Mr. Dinkelberg himself. Interesting guy. There's the Flatiron Building, in case you don't know what I mean. A few good ones here. The Maher Building was supposed to be one of a couple of buildings. But then 1929 happened. They lost all their money for that. New glass addition to the London House, the old London Guarantee Building, which is really a cool building. You used to have a jazz club in there called the London House. You can still go online right now and get Sarah Vaughan live after hours at the London House. Or Oscar Peterson Trio live at the London House. Now, there's a lot of albums recorded there, but by all accounts, the acoustics in there really sucked. It wasn't really built to have a jazz club at the time it was built. It was built to be insurance offices, about the least jazzy thing in the world. Over here, this thing that looks like a Disney villain tower is the old Chicago Tribune Building. But before we get into the Chicago Tribune Building, of course, I got to talk about this one that's coming up just behind the Wrigley Building with the yellow onion dome on top. The old Medina Athletic Club. It used to be like athletic clubs were so big they could have their own skyscrapers. Now, in this case, it is now the Intercontinental Hotel. And the building management maintains that they didn't plan to have the onion dome there. They planned to have the roof be a landing pad for Zeppelins, which never in a million years would have worked. But it was I think it was just a thing at the time in the 1920s. Even after we'd had a Zeppelin crash into Chicago, everybody was thinking, in 5 years, everybody's going to be traveling around in Zeppelins. Now, I'm determined to make this happen. We are going to rent a Zeppelin. We are going to land it on that thing. Just watch. One of these days, that'll be a Mystericon event. But yeah, Disney Villain Towers, the Chicago Tribune Building, Howells and Hoods, with flying buttresses that you also see echoed over here in the NBC building, which is an even more Art Deco version of Rockefeller Center by Adrian Smith, the Chicago architect. I love this one. It feels like Superman ought to be flying around this one. Rockefeller Center I will be going to in 1 week. In fact, maybe I'll try to get online. The cell phone signal at 30 Rock sucks. But maybe once I get up there, I'm going to be up on the observation deck or heading up there right about the time of 8 o'clock next Thursday. So maybe that can be the mini tour. At least I'll give it a try. Right there, we've got the pointy to Prudential Plaza. And just a little bit of the Aeon building. The very plain one with the, almost like one of the old Twin Towers. That one, they approached Harry Weiss about being the architect, and he already knew he wasn't getting the gig, so he told him, you're Standard Oil, right? I say you ought to have it be black, like your oil spills. Now, speaking of spills, you can see this kind of liquid building, Aqua Tower by Jeannie Gang, which was briefly, when it was built, the tallest building in the world designed by a woman, Chicago architect Jeannie Gang. It was quickly beaten out by some buildings overseas, but she has now taken that honor back with the Wanda Vista Tower, also known as the St. Regis Hotel. I don't know what we're going to land on actually calling this one. It was called Wanda Vista when it was under construction. By the time it was built, it had become the St. Regis. So we shall see, but 1,200 feet tall. You can see right there the blow-through floor, the space that they have left for just the wind to blow through, because once again, these buildings are known to sway in the wind a little bit, or give in the wind a little bit. And here, a liquid-tuned mass damper wasn't quite enough. I got to do a hard hat tour of the place a couple of years ago. We tried to get into the blow-through floor. We could not get into the blow-through floor. But it was kind of cool. It was all kind of surreptitious. I had a whole cover story that I was actually looking for an apartment in there, or a condo. But obviously it was not for me. I was looking for my client, who was definitely not Taylor Swift. Definitely not. But all right, and that will bring us back to the Lakeshore Drive Bridge. All right. This is a little bit more of an abbreviated version of the architectural boat tour, but I hope you have all enjoyed it. Once again, in September, we will be doing it again for Mystericon. It is an annual tradition around here at Mysterious Chicago Tours to do the boat tours. And I'm going to come up with some new material for it this year, I think. But all right, everybody, here's Earl Father Hines. Let's just hang out like we always do. Normally, I would plug the upcoming tours, but I'll be in New York next week, so...
dancing here in the cool atmosphere to this jive of Earl Father Hines. Yeah, but now...
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Leroy Harris to sing Now It Can Be Told.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks, Nancy. I know, if I don't do some of the old material, you guys don't have your callback lines or your places to drink. Octavio, I haven't seen that, but it does seem like every year there's a news story about what's going to go over where the spire was going to be. Try writing and eating with the opposite hand. That'll make a real mess. Laurent, I'm an excellent water skier. Believe it or not, I am very good at water skiing. Or I was last time I did it. About 25 years ago. 30. Somewhere in there, but I did like it. I'm good. Ooh, Bella's having some Laksang Souchong tea. I love that stuff. It tastes like a forest full of old people that somebody set fire to. Illustrations show the building will look Art Deco. Well, good. If they're going to put something there, I really hope they put something good there anywhere. You've seen the rat hole. I got to show you guys. Let me see if I can actually pull it up here. There was a pothole I saw one time. It was like 20 years ago now. I'm going to find that thing.
December 9th, add to it a little of the effervescent swing of Father Hines, and you have Beside a Moonlit Stream.
Let me see if I still have the picture on here someplace. Probably would have been taken in 2006 or so. Now, there was a pothole that once it filled up with rain, it looked exactly like Butthead. And I know I got the picture around here someplace. Maybe it was even 07 that it happened.
My heart is a tom-tom beating so fast. If this is only a dream, then why can it last forever, darling? The riverman sweetly, that you are mine completely. Beside a moonlit stream.
I remember about where it was and what I was biking home from when I took the picture. That may not be enough to solve the mystery. Okay, here it is. Found it. All right, here we go. Coming up. See? Butthead in profile. Do 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 do. Way more interesting to me than the Virgin Mary salt stain. I could never tell what they were looking at the Virgin Mary salt stain. We used to take people there on weird Chicago tours. Here, it's got a picture of the shrine. The shrine changed constantly. There's still, like, flowers and stuff get set up there all the time. It was under the Fullerton Street underpass back in 2005. And yeah, this salt stain up here that people thought looked like the Virgin Mary. I could never tell what they were looking at. Apparently Jews could not see it. But the shrine around it changed all the time. Like, one time we went there was a giant pyramid of Dr. Pepper cans, which I believe is a reference to Paul's letter to Mr. Pibb, which opens with, "Yo, Pibb, why you always gonna be a pepper hater? For thou art the pepper of the earth. Would not thou like to be a pepper too?" I remember one time we pulled up and there was a cop there who told me, "Yeah, there's also Joseph is over there," with a totally straight face. I could just, like, imagine the conversation. They got like, "Now, Mary, we need to go be a salt stain. I know you're already some toast, but, you know, Jesus here is everywhere. How do you feel about someone who says they can't do two places at once? Toast and salt stain." It's not asking too much. It's like, you gotta have at least two pieces of flair here. Now, I did have people on the tour who absolutely insisted they could tell exactly what it was. "Susan, if you saw the ghost of Elvis on Union Avenue and followed him up to the gates of Graceland, you would be walking a long way." That was something that really shocked me immensely. Like, this isn't anywhere near Graceland. That song no longer makes sense. Hey, did you see Block Club Chicago just called me a frozen pants pioneer? Which is nice, but now I gotta get like all new business cards now. Adam, frozen pant pioneer.
And down the groove now, we rather imagine you'll hear that famous 7 brass of Earl Hines in Bambino.
Welcome along, everybody. You can't just say his hair was perfect. You have to have the lip up after part. You got to remember that woo. Thanks to everybody who has hit me up over here. Over the weekend, I'll get enough Patreon posts ready ahead of time to be out of town for a bit. Totally struck out at the archives today, and frankly, I expect to strike out at the archives at Trinity. There's not too much else that I need. That's a good question. Where is Mr. Miles? Let's go find Mr. Miles. Here's the man. Well, you know, I will still try to get on as often as I can for the 10 o'clocks and try to keep you updated when I can. Yeah? Your breath smells like cat food. There he is, the mysterious Mr. Miles. He was sleeping over in an open suitcase. He loves open suitcases. I think all cats do. Alright, hop up again. Here we go. Say hi to everybody, Miles. Oh, I'm just gonna strike a pose there, huh? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna take him back to the suitcase. Kathy, he really loves boxes that are just a little too small for him. I'll show you while I'm at it. Lily doesn't usually come out here during tour time. She's hanging elsewhere. But here are Lily and Camilla warming up on the radiator. You can hardly tell where Lily ends and Camilla begins. Empty. Oh, Miles wants to do some jumping. You gonna jump, Miles? Gonna show everybody what a good jumper you are? Or are you just gonna come and play with it, come and mess with the thing? Oh, you caught it. All right. Sometimes you tune in on Whiskey and a Cookie on Friday nights to see him really catching some air. The shoulder's a lot easier.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a program.
Yeah, Heather, he hasn't played in nearly 2 hours.
Music really jived in top style. Earl Father Hines and his great orchestra have been playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's Great South Side. A program that reached you from Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
All right, that is Earl Father Hines wrapping it up for the National Broadcasting Company. So, all right, we will be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central for Find a Grave Friday. And that should be about it for me, really. So, all right, everybody, I was so eager to get into the archives today that I forgot to say it. So, everybody, make sure that you stay spooky. I will say it twice now. Definitely stay spooky. So, all right, I will see you in the morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining me for this on this very cold night. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tour, saying to stay safe and stay strong. And stay spooky. Have a good night.